During the height of the Cold War, the world was divided by an invisible iron curtain, but some brave individuals chose to cross it. These were the defectors, men and women who risked everything for freedom, carrying secrets that would shake the foundations of international espionage. Their stories were not just personal journeys of escape, they were acts of espionage that changed the course of global history, from hidden compartments in car trunks to military aircraft defying Soviet airspace. These escapes were nothing short of extraordinary. Today, we explore the most famous Cold War defectors and how they managed to slip through one of history's most heavily guarded barriers. If you're fascinated by Cold War history, espionage, and incredible true stories of escape, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a documentary. Now, let's dive into these extraordinary tales. The pilot who flew freedom, Viktor Belenko and the MiG-25 defection, 1976. On September 6, 1976, something extraordinary happened that would make headlines across the entire world. A Soviet pilot named Viktor Belenko, just 29 years old, made an audacious decision that would forever change Soviet-Western relations. From a Soviet airbase near Vladivostok, Lieutenant Viktor Belenko was on a routine training flight in one of the most advanced Soviet interceptor aircraft ever built, the MiG-25 Foxbat. What the KGB didn't know was that Belenko had no intention of returning. Belenko possessed something more valuable than his own life. He possessed the secrets of the feared MiG-25, an aircraft the West knew very little about. This wasn't just any plane. It was the pride of Soviet aviation technology. During the training exercise, Belenko fooled ground crews into loading extra fuel. Breaking formation, he dove toward the Sea of Japan, flying low to evade Soviet radar detection. Hours later, the astonished air traffic controllers at Hakodate Airport in Japan watched in disbelief as a Soviet MiG-25 interceptor made an unprecedented landing. The pilot who emerged was seeking asylum in the West. Belenko's motivations were complex. Soviet investigations later revealed that the young lieutenant had become increasingly disenchanted with Soviet life. He had been passed over for a promotion to captain and was denied an appointment as squadron chief of staff, a position he had been promised. His family relationships were strained. He expressed hatred toward his wife and claimed to have a difficult relationship with his stepmother. He had virtually no contact with his 3-year-old son, whom his mother-in-law had taken charge of. But there was something deeper, a growing ideological dissatisfaction with communism that had been building for years. The Americans and Japanese were stunned but thrilled. American intelligence made full use of Belenko's gift. The MiG-25 was completely disassembled and studied in meticulous detail. Every component analyzed, every secret unlocked. For the first time, Western engineers could examine the technology that had terrified them for years. The aircraft was eventually returned to the Soviet Union in pieces, but the knowledge gained was invaluable. The West learned that the MiG-25 had certain vulnerabilities they could exploit. In 1980, Congress granted Belenko citizenship. He revealed that the Soviet Union was developing the MiG-31 Foxhound interceptor, intelligence that shaped Western defensive strategies. Unlike many defectors, Belenko never attempted contact with his family, cutting all ties with his past life in the Soviet Union. The Spy Master's Midnight Escape, Oleg Gordievsky, and Operation Pimlico, 1985. If Viktor Belenko's defection was a dramatic high-altitude escape, Oleg Gordievsky's departure from the Soviet Union was an exercise in cold calculation, precision planning, and desperate timing. Gordievsky was no ordinary defector. He was a high-ranking KGB colonel, one of the most trusted intelligence officers in Soviet counterintelligence. By 1985, he had become KGB resident designate and bureau chief in London, responsible for overseeing all Soviet espionage operations in Britain. But unknown to Moscow, Gordievsky harbored a dangerous secret. He had been working as a double agent for British intelligence, MI6, since 1974. For over a decade, he had been providing the West with classified information about Soviet intelligence operations worldwide. What drove one of the KGB's finest officers to betray his nation? The seeds were planted early. In Stockholm during the 1970s, Gordievsky witnessed freedoms unknown in Soviet society. His disenchantment deepened, witnessing the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia. By 1974, he signed on to work for MI6 under code names Sunbeam, Nocton, and Tickle, initially refusing payment. As his career advanced within the KGB, Gordievsky became an exceptionally valuable asset. He helped expose KGB spies working against the West and provided MI6 with crucial insights into Soviet intelligence methodology. Most importantly, he alerted Western leaders to a terrifying Soviet misconception. The Kremlin believed the West was planning a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. Armed with this intelligence from Gordievsky, Western political leaders were able to carefully calibrate their rhetoric, deliberately de-escalating tensions to calm paranoid Kremlin fears. Without Gordievsky's warnings, Cold War tensions could have erupted into Armageddon. Then, in April 1985, everything changed. Gordievsky was promoted to a senior position in London. But 2 months later, on May 19, 1985, he received an unexpected summons. Moscow wanted him back immediately. Gordievsky realized what this meant. A mole had exposed him. Indeed, CIA counterintelligence officer Aldrich Ames, a man who had secretly turned traitor and was working for the KGB, had blown Gordievsky's cover. Ames had told the Kremlin that Gordievsky was a British agent. Gordievsky returned to Moscow, where he was placed under intense KGB surveillance. What followed was an interrogation that would determine whether he lived or died. Soviet officials got Gordievsky drunk on cognac and then subjected him to a grueling 5-hour interrogation. A KGB general demanded confessions and repeatedly ordered him to recount his alleged treason. Gordievsky was exhausted, his memory failing, uncertain what information the KGB possessed. When he returned to his Moscow apartment, he realized his situation was hopeless. He was under sentence of death, and execution was merely a matter of time and paperwork. But Gordievsky had something crucial. MI6 had provided him with an emergency escape plan, hidden in invisible ink written into a collection of Shakespeare sonnets. The instructions were simple but dangerous. On July 19, 1985, Gordievsky stepped out of his Moscow apartment in worn clothing. He walked for 3 hours through Moscow streets, avoiding direct routes and KGB surveillance. He headed to Leningrad train station, boarding a train to Zelenogorsk, then a bus to Vyborg near the Finnish border. Near Vyborg, British embassy cars waited at a pre-arranged rendezvous. The original extraction plan failed. Red Square was cordoned off. MI6 handlers arranged a second meeting that succeeded. British cars appeared with KGB surveillance vehicles trailing them, leading to a high-speed chase through Moscow streets. MI6 agents lost their pursuers using sophisticated evasion techniques. At the Soviet-Finnish border, Gordievsky was hidden in the trunk of a Ford Sierra. As the car crossed into Finland, he heard the muffled sounds of border guards. They didn't search the trunk. Minutes later, Gordievsky was free. On September 12, 1985, the British Foreign Office announced that Oleg Gordievsky had sought and been granted asylum in the United Kingdom. The world erupted in shock. Moscow responded by expelling 25 British diplomats, journalists, and trade officials. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher negotiated with Soviet leadership, attempting to trade leniency on Gordievsky's exposed agents for permission for his family to join him. Moscow refused. Thatcher, citing Gordievsky's intelligence, ordered the expulsion of additional Soviet officials. Gordievsky lived in Surrey, England, until his death in 2025 at the age of 86. He became the subject of Ben McIntyre's acclaimed book, The Spy and the Traitor, the greatest espionage story of the Cold War. His intelligence helped prevent World War III. As historian Ben McIntyre wrote, "The pantheon of world-changing spies is small and select, and Oleg Gordievsky is in it." The Invisible Ink and the Bureaucrat, Vladimir Kuzychkin, The Iranian Asset, 1982. While Gordievsky was ascending the ranks of the KGB in Europe, another Soviet intelligence officer was making a crucial decision on the opposite side of the globe. Vladimir Anatolievich Kuzychkin was born in 1947 and represented a different breed of KGB officer. He was a major in Directorate S, the most secretive directorate of the KGB, responsible for foreign espionage, sabotage, and assassination operations worldwide. Kuzychkin's posting was Tehran, Iran, beginning in 1977. He was stationed at the Soviet embassy, fluent in Farsi, the Persian language. His job was to manage Soviet intelligence operations throughout Iran and maintain contact with the Tudeh Party, Iran's communist organization. His timing was extraordinary. Kuzychkin arrived in Iran just as the Shah's regime was crumbling. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 transformed the nation, bringing Ayatollah Khomeini and Islamic fundamentalism to power. Suddenly, the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically. Despite 2 promotions during his Tehran posting, Kuzychkin grew increasingly disenchanted with the KGB. The reasons were personal and professional: the pressures of intelligence work, the moral compromises required, and doubts about the Soviet system began to wear on him. By early 1982, Kuzychkin made contact with British intelligence. He became a double agent, offering his services to MI6. But working as a double agent in Tehran was extraordinarily risky. The KGB maintained strict security protocols. Kuzychkin knew that if his deception was discovered, execution would be his fate. In June 1982, things became too dangerous. Kuzychkin made his move. He defected, leaving the Soviet embassy behind and seeking refuge in the West. The details of Kuzychkin's defection and initial escape remain partially obscured by classification. We know that he traveled through Turkey with British assistance. For 4 months, June to October 1982, his whereabouts were concealed. Then, in October, he was finally spirited to London, where British intelligence conducted extensive debriefing sessions. Kuzychkin proved to be what British and American intelligence termed a big fish, a high-ranking KGB officer capable of revealing the inner workings of Soviet espionage. He provided invaluable information about KGB operations, names of Soviet agents worldwide, and operational plans. But Kuzychkin's defection had a darker consequence, one that demonstrates the brutal real-world impacts of Cold War espionage. Kuzychkin had provided British intelligence and the CIA with the names of dozens of Soviet agents operating in Iran and sympathizers of the Iranian Communist Tudeh Party. This intelligence was particularly sensitive because the Soviet Union had embedded numerous operatives and informants within Iran's government and military. In a decision that remains controversial among intelligence historians, this intelligence was leaked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Security Services. The Iranian authorities used this information ruthlessly. Dozens of communist operatives and Soviet informants were rounded up, imprisoned, and executed. The Tudeh Party, which had briefly collaborated with Khomeini's Islamic Revolution in hopes of influencing it toward communism, was completely destroyed. What had been one of the Middle East's most significant communist organizations was decimated. This dark consequence illustrates a fundamental reality of Cold War defection. While defectors' personal escapes might be heroic, their intelligence could have devastating consequences for the people left behind. Kuzychkin survived and later published his memoir, Inside the KGB, My Life in Soviet Espionage, providing a rare insider's perspective on the Soviet Union's most secretive intelligence directorate. Patterns, motivations, and consequences. Historians have identified several consistent motivations among Cold War defectors. Many, like Gordievsky and Belenko, experienced a fundamental crisis of faith with communism. The gap between propaganda and Western reality was too vast to ignore. Personal grievances also played roles. Belenko's denied promotion and strained family relationships contributed significantly. Some defectors, like Kuzychkin, grew morally troubled by intelligence work and communist governance. Cold War defectors provided unprecedented intelligence insights. Gordievsky's warning about Soviet nuclear fears prevented escalation that could have triggered nuclear war. But defection carried profound costs. Defectors were severed from homelands, families, and cultures. Many never reunited with loved ones. The Kremlin pursued relentless vengeance. Defectors were sentenced to death in absentia, their families facing interrogation and imprisonment. Their intelligence sometimes had tragic consequences. Iranian communists were executed after Kuzychkin's defection. Historian Eric Scott notes that defectors were frequently misunderstood. Their motivations were often extremely complicated and contradictory.